In November 2022, a relatively small company that many people still viewed as an experimental research lab launched a product that did something very few businesses have ever managed to do in the history of technology. It put Google on alert. Within days, millions of people were using ChatGPT to answer questions, write content, generate ideas, and solve problems in a way that seems to challenge everything that had come before it. The growth was so explosive that executives, investors, and industry analysts began asking a question that would have sounded almost impossible just a few months earlier. What if the company that had dominated the internet for more than 2 decades was finally facing its biggest threat? For years, Google had been considered the undisputed leader in artificial intelligence. Its researchers were responsible for some of the most important breakthroughs in the field. Its labs attracted many of the world's brightest minds. Its technology powered search engines, language translation systems, virtual assistants, and countless digital products used by billions of people every day. Its lead seemed so overwhelming that few believed anyone could realistically challenge it. Then something unexpected happened. The company that brought artificial intelligence into the global spotlight wasn't Google. It was OpenAI. Almost overnight, an organization that had started as an ambitious research initiative became one of the most talked-about names in the world. ChatGPT turned into a cultural phenomenon. Schools debated its impact, businesses rushed to understand how it could transform their operations, governments began paying attention. Investors saw the beginning of a new technological race worth hundreds of billions of dollars. What made the situation even more remarkable was that the technology stunning the world hadn't appeared out of nowhere. Many of the foundational breakthroughs that made these systems possible had been developed inside Google's own research teams years earlier. Yet it was another company capturing the world's attention. At that moment, the story stopped being just about technology. It became a battle for influence, market share, talent, investment, and control over a technology that many believe could be as important as the internet itself. On one side stood Google, one of the most powerful corporate empires ever built, backed by immense resources and decades of leadership in artificial intelligence. On the other stood OpenAI, a rapidly rising organization backed by Microsoft, increasingly positioned to challenge the very business model that had fueled Google's dominance for years. What began as a quiet rivalry between researchers was evolving into one of the most important technology wars of the 21st century. And one question sat at the center of it all. Who will ultimately control the future of artificial intelligence? To understand how this rivalry reached this point, we need to go back to a time when artificial intelligence occupied a very different place in the technology industry. For much of the 2000s and the decade that followed, AI was largely invisible. It helped recommend videos, organize search results, recognize faces in photos, and improve online advertising. It was important, but it worked behind the scenes. Most people interacted with artificial intelligence every day without even realizing it. In that environment, only a handful of companies had the resources necessary to lead the field. Training advanced AI systems required enormous amounts of data, massive computing power, and teams made up of the world's top researchers. Google appeared to have all of those advantages at once. The company controlled one of the largest digital infrastructures on Earth, possessed access to vast amounts of data, and invested billions of dollars into research and development. Over time, that position allowed Google to assemble extraordinary talent. Many of the most significant breakthroughs in modern artificial intelligence emerged from its labs. The company wasn't simply keeping up with the technology. In many ways, it was setting the direction for the entire industry. But beneath the surface, a different problem was beginning to emerge. As AI systems became more powerful, concerns grew over who would ultimately control this technology. Some researchers questioned whether the future of artificial intelligence should be concentrated in the hands of a few tech giants. Others worried that progress was moving faster than society's ability to understand its consequences. It was in this environment that OpenAI was born. At first, it didn't look like a threat to anyone. Its mission was fundamentally different from the traditional Silicon Valley model. OpenAI was created with the goal of developing advanced artificial intelligence in a way that could benefit humanity as a whole. The idea attracted researchers, engineers, and investors who wanted to build something that wasn't driven solely by the priorities of the largest technology companies. For years, OpenAI operated far from the spotlight that would later make it famous. While Google continued expanding its products and strengthening its leadership, OpenAI focused on research, experimentation, and the development of increasingly capable machine learning models. Outside the tech community, very few people were paying attention. But inside the industry, signs were beginning to appear. OpenAI's models were showing increasingly impressive capabilities. With each new generation, they became better at understanding human language, producing sophisticated responses, and performing tasks that had once seemed uniquely human. At the same time, a major shift was taking shape across the technology market. For the first time in decades, a new way of accessing information seemed possible. The internet had long been built around search. Users typed a question, received a list of links, and decided where to click. That model became the foundation of one of the most successful business empires in modern history. But what if people stopped searching that way? What if, instead of browsing pages and links, they simply had a conversation with an AI capable of delivering complete, personalized answers in seconds? The opportunity was enormous, but so was the threat. While many companies approached this possibility cautiously, OpenAI began moving aggressively forward. A major partnership with Microsoft dramatically expanded its resources, giving the company access to the computing power needed to train increasingly advanced models. Suddenly, the organization that had started as an ambitious research project had something few expected: a real chance to compete in a field dominated by some of the largest companies in the world. What wasn't yet clear was that this shift was laying the foundation for an inevitable confrontation. Because for the first time, someone wasn't simply trying to participate in the AI revolution. They were trying to rewrite the rules of a game that Google had spent years creating. When ChatGPT was released to the public, expectations were relatively modest. Even within the technology industry, few people anticipated what would happen next. Innovative products appear in Silicon Valley all the time. Most attract temporary attention before fading from the spotlight. This was different. The growth was so rapid that it surprised even the people who built it. Millions of users began experimenting with the platform. Then tens of millions followed. Businesses started testing it inside their organizations. Professionals used it to write reports, organize information, and streamline everyday tasks. Students discovered new ways to learn. Software developers use it to assist with coding. Journalists, lawyers, designers, and entrepreneurs all found ways to integrate the technology into their daily work. What mattered most was how simple the experience felt. For years, advanced artificial intelligence had remained largely confined to research labs, universities, and specialized technical teams. Now, anyone with an internet connection could interact directly with a system capable of generating detailed responses in seconds. For the first time, AI stopped being an invisible technology and became a product that millions of people consciously used. That shift changed the market overnight. Investors no longer viewed artificial intelligence as just another supporting technology. They began to see it as the foundation of the next generation of the digital economy. Capital poured into AI startups. Established companies started rethinking their long-term strategies. Executives who once treated artificial intelligence as a future opportunity suddenly considered it an immediate priority. Meanwhile, OpenAI kept advancing. Each new model demonstrated significant improvements. Responses became more accurate. Reasoning capabilities improved. Performance across complex tasks continued to expand. What had started as a fascinating technology demo was increasingly being viewed as a practical business tool capable of generating real economic value. The partnership with Microsoft accelerated everything. The company recognized the potential early and made one of the most aggressive bets in modern technology history. Billions of dollars were invested to expand the infrastructure required to train increasingly powerful AI systems. OpenAI's technology began appearing inside products used by businesses and consumers around the world. Suddenly, OpenAI was no longer just a research organization. It was building an ecosystem. Developers started creating applications on top of its models. Companies integrated its technology into their own platforms. Entire startups emerged because those tools existed. The more people relied on OpenAI's systems, the greater its influence became over the direction of the industry itself. A powerful network effect was taking shape. OpenAI wasn't simply selling a product, it was shaping expectations. When people thought about generative AI, the first name that often came to mind was ChatGPT. The brand achieved a level of recognition rarely seen for a technology that new. At the same time, competitors were scrambling to catch up. Smaller companies launched alternative models. New startups promised similar capabilities. Major corporations announced ambitious AI initiatives, but OpenAI's momentum made it difficult for anyone to close the gap. The company had captured something incredibly valuable in the technology world: attention. And in many technological revolutions, leadership doesn't necessarily belong to whoever invents the technology first. It belongs to whoever turns it into a global habit. That is exactly what appeared to be happening. ChatGPT stopped being a novelty and became part of everyday life for millions of people. Its user base expanded across the globe, while discussions about artificial intelligence dominated news headlines, industry conferences, boardroom meetings, and government agendas. AI was suddenly everywhere, and OpenAI was at the center of the conversation. The impact extended far beyond the technology sector. Financial markets reacted to every announcement. Companies were evaluated based on their AI strategies. Demand for top talent exploded. Universities expanded machine learning programs. Governments began exploring regulation, safety frameworks, and national AI strategies. The more AI advanced, the more obvious it became that a new race had begun. And at that moment, OpenAI appeared to be leading it. What made the situation even more remarkable was the contrast with reality just a few years earlier. The organization that had started as an ambitious research initiative now possessed enough influence to shape strategic decisions at some of the largest companies on Earth. Its product launches were watched by global investors. Its models became benchmarks for the industry. Its choices helped define the standards of a technology that promised to transform nearly every sector of the economy. The rise had been extraordinary. Perhaps too extraordinary. Because the larger OpenAI became, the more inevitable a confrontation with the one company capable of matching its resources, expertise, and ambition. A company that watched every breakthrough, every product launch, and every headline, knowing that its own future could depend on the outcome. That company was Google. But the story of this rivalry was never as simple as it appeared. At the very moment the world began viewing OpenAI as the new dominant force in artificial intelligence, a less visible reality existed behind the scenes. The company that seemed to be falling behind was still one of the most powerful organizations ever built. And in many ways, Google continued to hold advantages that no competitor could ignore. The irony was impossible to miss. Much of the revolution powering ChatGPT could be traced back to research conducted inside Google's own labs years earlier. Many of the breakthroughs that made modern large language models possible had originated from Google's scientists. The knowledge was there. The researchers were there. The infrastructure was there. The capital was there. And yet, the spotlight had shifted elsewhere. To outside observers, that looked like an obvious mistake. Inside Google, however, the situation was far more complicated. Google wasn't operating like a startup chasing headlines. It was managing one of the most profitable business models ever created. Its search engine generated enormous revenue through digital advertising. Billions of users depended on its products every day. Any major change to its ecosystem had to be evaluated through a lens much broader than innovation alone. Launching a conversational AI product to hundreds of millions of users carried enormous risks. A system producing inaccurate answers could damage trust built over decades. Misinformation could trigger public backlash. Problematic responses could create legal and regulatory challenges. While startups could afford to move fast and correct mistakes later, companies the size of Google faced much greater consequences for every decision. For a long time, caution seemed reasonable. Then the market started changing faster than anyone expected. As ChatGPT's popularity surged, a new question began circulating among investors and executives. If an AI system can answer questions directly, what happens to traditional search? It was an uncomfortable question. For decades, the internet had revolved around search. Users typed queries, platforms displayed links, businesses competed for visibility, advertisements generated revenue throughout the process. Entire industries were built around that model. Now an alternative was emerging. Instead of presenting users with pages of links, an AI could deliver a direct, organized answer within seconds. If that behavior became the norm, the consequences for the market could be profound. For the first time in years, investors started questioning something that once seemed untouchable: Google's position as the gateway to the internet. The pressure intensified. OpenAI continued releasing new updates. Microsoft accelerated the integration of AI across its products. New startups appeared almost weekly, hoping to capitalize on the generative AI boom. Enthusiasm across the market continued to grow. Then the first signs of tension began to appear. Google responded by accelerating its own AI initiatives and pushing conversational products into the spotlight. Projects that had previously moved at a measured pace were suddenly treated as urgent priorities. Teams were reorganized, resources were redirected. The company mobilized on a massive scale. But recovering technology is easier than recovering perception. By that point, the public had already associated the AI revolution with another name. At the same time, OpenAI was beginning to face challenges of its own. Explosive growth brought enormous expectations. Every new release was scrutinized. Every limitation became a headline. Every mistake attracted intense attention. The larger the company became, the greater the pressure to deliver breakthroughs that matched the growing hype surrounding it. The race was becoming more expensive, more complex, and far more dangerous. Training cutting-edge models required staggering amounts of computing power and capital. Competition for top talent intensified. Governments around the world began paying closer attention. Questions surrounding safety, copyright, privacy, regulation, and economic disruption moved to the center of the conversation. What had once looked like a technology race was starting to resemble a long-term geopolitical and economic struggle. And in that environment, both companies had blind spots. OpenAI had to prove it could turn explosive growth into sustainable leadership. Google had to prove it could still define the future instead of reacting to it. Neither challenge was easy. OpenAI possessed momentum, public attention, and one of the most recognizable brands in artificial intelligence. But it also depended on massive investments and faced scaling challenges that few organizations in history had encountered. Google possessed virtually unlimited resources, world-class researchers, and decades of experience. But it carried the burden of protecting an empire built on a business model that could be disrupted by the very technology it helped create. That was the turning point. The competition was no longer about releasing the best product. It became a battle over whose vision of the future would win. On one side stood the company that captured the world's imagination and accelerated the adoption of artificial intelligence on a global scale. On the other stood the company that helped build the foundations of the AI revolution and was now fighting to reclaim its position at the center of it. And as more billions were invested, more talent was recruited, and more AI systems entered the market, one reality became increasingly difficult to ignore. Maybe this was never just a rivalry between OpenAI and Google. Maybe the real battle was for control of humanity's next interface to knowledge, information, and intelligence itself. The outcome of this war has not been decided. Unlike many business stories, there is no single moment when one company wins and the other disappears. What happened after the turning point was far more interesting. The rivalry reshaped the trajectory of the entire technology industry and forced nearly every major company on the planet to rethink its strategy. OpenAI achieved something very few organizations ever accomplish. It changed market behavior. Before ChatGPT, Artificial intelligence was largely viewed as a specialized tool. After ChatGPT, it became a global priority. Companies that once moved cautiously suddenly accelerated their AI plans. Boardrooms demanded AI strategies. Investors poured billions into the sector. Governments rushed to address regulation, safety, and national competitiveness. At the same time, Google did not disappear, nor did it lose its relevance. If anything, the competitive pressure pushed the company to move faster, invest more aggressively, and make artificial intelligence an even more central part of its products and long-term vision. What many initially viewed as an existential threat became one of the largest adaptation efforts in the company's history. But the most important shift happened somewhere else. It happened in the way the world thinks about innovation. For years, it seemed as though only a handful of established technology giants possessed the resources necessary to shape the future. OpenAI's rise demonstrated that even in markets dominated by trillion-dollar empires, new challengers can still emerge. Not because they have more money, not because they have more infrastructure, but because they recognize a shift before everyone else and transform it into something people genuinely want to use. That may be the most important lesson of this entire story. Technology matters, scale matters, capital matters, but none of those things guarantee permanent leadership. Google had some of the world's best researchers. OpenAI found a way to capture public attention more effectively. OpenAI became the face of the AI revolution. Google responded with the advantages that only a global technology giant could deploy: scale, resources, and execution. As a result, the entire industry was pushed into a pace of transformation that few believed possible. Meanwhile, new competitors continue to emerge. Specialized AI companies are building their own models. Independent research labs are attracting massive investments. Governments are funding national AI initiatives. What once looked like a market controlled by a small group of companies has become a global battlefield. And that means this story is far from over. Because the real question was never who launched the best chatbot. The real question is, who will succeed in turning artificial intelligence into the defining platform of the next digital era? Looking back, it becomes clear that this is not simply a story about technology. It is a story about timing, about vision, about strategic decisions, about the difference between inventing something revolutionary and turning it into a product capable of changing behavior on a global scale. It is also a reminder that no empire remains untouchable forever. In an industry where innovation moves at extraordinary speed, decades of dominance can be challenged in a matter of months. Companies once considered unstoppable can suddenly find themselves under pressure. Smaller organizations can reshape entire markets. And the next major disruption almost always emerges from a place few people are watching. The war between OpenAI and Google is still unfolding. Billions of dollars continue to flow into artificial intelligence. New technologies continue to emerge. And the future of AI is still being written in real time. But one lesson already stands out. Power builds empires. Innovation creates opportunity. Competition rewrites the rules. And time ultimately decides who stays on top. If you enjoy stories about the companies, strategies, rivalries, and billion-dollar decisions shaping the future of technology, subscribe to Inside Tech Empires and let us know in the comments, who do you think will win the AI war? OpenAI or Google?